over 200. We've had over 200 people added in the last day or two, and all of them wanted to be able to participate, especially in tonight's discussion. So I'm hoping we'll get a couple more here to participate in this. But after listening to Warwick's podcast, realizing how much great information is out there in book form from these amazing horsemen, horsewomen, trainers, coaches, etc. I really just wanted to have a good, deep discussion so we can all further our understanding of how to have a better relationship, not just with our equine friends, but also with people in general. Because I don't know about you, but the better relationship I have with my horse, it often translates into my relationships with people as well.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll see what we can get going here. But tonight, we are so blessed to have Dr. Susan Fay join us for our very first discussion group. So if any of you at any time have any questions you'd like to have Dr. answer, please feel free to put them into the chat. Depending on how many people we have overall, hopeful that we'll have some in-person discussion. Microphone if you haven't already. All right, I hear a couple of microphones in there. If you don't mind muting real quick, that would be fantastic. Actually, I can do that. Mute all. Okay, there we go. Okay, all right, Dr. Fay, I've just asked you to unmute your microphone. So we'll go ahead and get started. And as people keep coming in, we'll keep adding them in. And if you were one of the last minute additions, again, thank you very much for being here. So Dr. Fay, if you don't mind just saying a couple of words, introduce yourself. I'm sure everybody here has read your book, so they should know who you are, but just say a quick hello.
Oh, hello everyone, and I'm so excited. As you were talking, it was almost bringing tears to my eyes because it's been such a long time in the process of writing the book and getting this information out there, and it's just so heartwarming to know it's actually coming to fruition now, and everyone's excited, and that's just so heartwarming. So thank you everybody who's here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think we're at a time when there's a great movement for people to dive into and open up their hearts and open up their minds and their bodies and their spirits to the lessons that the horses in our lives can teach us, whether we own them, lease them, feed them carrots, whatever role they have in our lives. And just seeing this massive movement honestly gives me a lot of hope, knowing that there are so many people wanting to change the way they relate to horses, animals, people, the world, the environment. It all ripples out and it all translates to something a little bit, something much further. So I can go ahead and get started here. And one of the first questions that I wanted to ask was, and you did briefly discuss this in your introduction about why you wrote the book and why you wanted to share this information and get this out there to as many people as possible. But can you just start by explaining where there may have been a shift in your own life that started to help you to realize that this was a gift that you had to share with the world through your writing and through your own experiences?
Wow. I kind of talk about it a little bit in the first intro part of the book about the experience I had, but I had been doing that for time before that. But what happened in those old days, I talk about the old days, it wasn't okay to say anything about those kind of experiences, and you were made fun of or you were marginalized and you were on the fringes and the outside. And so it really was something I hid for so long. I didn't want anybody to know about anything I was doing with the horses. I just went about it on my ranch, kind of in the quiet space without anybody coming over, and I just did my own thing. But it really came to light after I left the ranch and I got a divorce and all this, there's all these life changes that happen, and I started interacting more with people with their horses, and I thought, why are they having so many problems? I never saw those problems on the ranch and with all the horses I bred and raised and trained, and so it really made me start to think, what's going on here? What's happening? And that really led me to the idea that I need to study human psychology also. I need to take that information I had from training horses, but then I needed more. I needed to understand the human part of that and the relational parts and understand that in a very complex way. So that's kind of what drove me. And it's like, once I got in that area, it's kind of self-motivating because you see somebody have some wonderful experiences and then you go, wow, that was a simple thing I showed them. And look what it made a big difference in their life. And, a lot of things we take for granted that we were doing, or, I don't know. I never thought it was anything special until I realized that other people didn't necessarily know about those things I was doing and didn't even think about them for the most part. So,
yeah. And I imagine that I'm not the only one who had this revelation when reading the words that you wrote and reading your book, but there was a lot of moments in there when I would say, oh my gosh, I do this, or I've noticed a change in my horse's relationship to me when I've been in that space or in that state. And I think for a long time, as somebody who's wanted to improve myself and improve how I relate to the world around me and the animals and the people in my world, I've often been frustrated thinking that I'm getting nowhere with the work that I'm doing, that I'm still stuck in this space of maybe negative energy, or stuck in a space of I can't, or I don't know how. And when I don't know if anybody on the call has an experience where they remember the first time that they had one of those aha moments where they realize, like, holy cow, actually I am doing the work, and it has a direct impact on the horse and the people around me. And so just reading, there were so many moments where I just had to put a hand on my heart and say, I am doing the work. And it is having an impact, and it just seems so slow and so minute when we're in the thick of it and we're the ones living it out.
exactly. And I think you bring up a really good point. It's like everybody can do this, and that's what I wanted to get across in the book, is that everybody can do this, and a lot of people already are, but to do it in a very conscious way, and to know that there's science behind what I'm talking about and what we're doing. And so it doesn't have to be on the fringes anymore. It is for real, and you can replicate these experiences. And that's all I really wanted to do, is give people permission. Go do this, go play, go. And don't listen to those other people that say, oh, you have to do it this way because this is the established way to do it. And that's really hard in the horse world. I'm sure a lot of you have come across that when, you're out there doing something a little bit different and people are like, oh, I don't know about that girl over there. She's a little odd, and you just gotta keep going and go. You don't know what's going on here. Just, I'm on my own path. Just, why does it bother you?
Let each their own.
Exactly.
I wonder, have you heard of, there's a couple of phrases coming to mind as you're talking about it, as you're saying, do it consciously, play around and do things with awareness. Have you heard of the terms unconscious competence and conscious competence?
Yes. Yes.
Just making note of how we have to, at the start, kind of be aware of our energy, our intention, what we may be transmitting. And we have to be consciously aware of it. But the more you do it and it just becomes a part of you, you become unconsciously competent.
Right. And I believe that's, a lot of people that I work with say, oh my gosh, this is so hard to do. And they're in that place where, okay, yeah, it is, because you have to think about every step of it and everything you're doing. And there's so much energy just to pay attention until you get to that unconscious competence level. And then it just flows. And that's the beautiful part, and why I encourage people to keep doing the work, because yeah, it's hard at the beginning, but the payoffs at the end are so magnificent. And now when I go do the work, I don't have to think about my breathing. I don't have to think about where's my grounding, where's my emotions, where's all this. It just happens immediately and spontaneously. And the connections with the horses, same thing. They happen spontaneously without that hard work. But you don't get there without the hard work. So there really aren't the shortcuts to it.
Yeah, and I think that's both comforting and frustrating.
Exactly.
It means that, like, if you're putting in the work, you are going to get results, but it also means you have to put in the work.
Yes.
I would like to kind of start this out by bringing some questions and comments to you that some folks had shared either with me, either via email or in the Facebook group, that they wanted to make sure that you saw. So one of the questions that I got says, do we really need to be present to help horses to release past traumas, or do they do it on their own when we are not there?
That's a good question. I think that they do release them when we're not there. However, when I do the work that I'm doing with horses that have emotional trauma or some kind of physical trauma, it gets stored in their body, in their tissues, in their cells. It's stored all over in the nervous system, everything. And what I do in those cases is I feel like, yes, I do have to be completely present, and I have to be there as a support for that horse so that they can decide whether or not they are safe enough to release that trauma. Okay. And they might do it if you're not present, but I find that there's so much more, that when I can stay in that space, and it's really a space of neutrality. I talk a lot about the neutral space of no thought, no anything, just being present. And it's that sacred space. It's that space where you allow no judgment to happen, no behaviors the horse comes up with in that trauma release to bother you. And you just go, yes, if you're ready, you can let it go. And I am here and holding this space for you to do that. But I'm also not on you going, you have to do it, or, it's a very difficult space to be in and hold, because you've got to say, I have no stake in this. You do what you want. And it's all that love space and that just being that really allows healing, whether it's a human or an animal. Because that's the space when we're present and we're not thinking of anything else, that's where healing happens. So that's just my experience with that one.
Yeah, personally, some of the more impactful interactions that I've had with my horses, and my horses are both rescue horses, one of whom came from a more traumatic history than the other did, was when I just was there, just breathing, and it feels like you're doing nothing. And those often feel like there's nothing happening, but I think down beneath the surface, everything is happening.
Absolutely it is. And that's, I think, in our society, we've always been praised for the people that do a lot. Doing means results, right? And so they see me a lot of times, I think, in clinics and different things where you haven't done anything for a long time. You just stand there. Oh, I'm doing things, but it's being present is doing something. It's difficult. It's difficult to hold if you haven't been in that space. So yeah, there's a lot more gets done there than if you're running the horse around and trying to get other things done. I get a whole lot more done in the quiet space of presence than I do running a horse around and correcting behaviors with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the chat that we've just gotten says, I've heard this before, we are human beings, not human doings.
And I love that one. Absolutely.
Okay.
I think horses are so good at doing nothing, and they're so happy to do nothing. And they love it when we enter that space. And that's why I talk a little in the book about becoming more horse-like. And that's part of what I'm talking about, is that we become present and we don't need to do a whole lot of stuff. And when I'm that way and I walk up to a horse, it's almost like they immediately know that's what I'm about. And they just go, oh, cool. I'll come up to you. You know, and it's that simple. It's that simple.
Like with wild horses, how they can tell the difference when a predator is coming and actively trying to come after them versus when it's just coming to get a drink of water. I feel like it's kind of, because humans, our society is built upon doing. It's been created on this empire of productivity and just always progressing. And so that brings a question in my mind. If you could share a little bit about your experiences with how you might relate to feelings of impatience or feelings of incompetence or anything that you've dealt with along the way, with regards to everything that you talk about in your book, whether it's holding an intention or having a vision in your head and kind of setting the stage for what you'd like that horse to do. Is that something that you've dealt with through the years?
Absolutely. And I just recently had someone, I think this is what you're talking about. So she had a lot of, I wouldn't say impatience, more she had some fear. She had some anxiety come up when she was just asking a horse to pick its foot up. And so, you know, I could see that that was really impacting the horse's ability to actually do it without like getting all tense and all that. So what I did with her was break it down, and we worked on her first as far as grounding. Said, don't even look at the horse. We're going to make sure you're in your space. You can do it. And what you're going to report to me is the second that you start to feel a little anxiety, and we're going to stop and we're going to get back in that space. And it was that place where we didn't try to do the whole picking up the foot as a one whole big movement. I had her go and stand by the horse, breathe, and wait till he shifted his weight over, with pictures in her mind of him shifting his weight over so he could actually pick that foot up. And then I'd have her stop when he did and walk away. And she'd go, I got so excited, or something. And so she would go away. She walked away and said, okay, I got a little anxious there. And so I walked away and I'm getting back together. Okay. And then we'll go back and do it again. And again, I'm not asking for the whole movement because that was too much for her to think about, to execute, to do it without becoming either impatient or anxious. And so that's how I start people with this, because it's very difficult. You can have these little times she would say, oh, thought came into my mind, and it was like, it's not going to happen. And then he's going to run, or she said, the one time I had to walk away because I thought, oh, I want to grab his foot now because it started to come up, and so it was catching herself in that. So pretty much everything that I do as far as an exercise with people is an exercise both for the horse and for becoming present and for knowing what your emotional state is at any moment. And so I find that I want to weave both of those into everything I do. And the big piece of it is the slow down and the pause. And those are the two things I think are most important.
So say when you're picking up a foot and you're trying to maintain that presence and that awareness and kind of that vision in your head of it happening slowly, when an intrusive thought comes in that might be related to anxiety or fear, or all of a sudden you find your mind switching to, what if the horse kicks? Because I'll be honest, that's that happens to me more often than I care to admit. And I was just kicked by my young yearling 6 weeks ago.
Oh, no.
Mind. So when someone is going through that and that thought pops up, what then? So maybe they're trying to pick it up and everything's going fine, and all of a sudden they notice that intrusive thought comes in. What do you have them do in that moment?
I have them stop what they're doing. So a lot of times I'm the observer in this process, and a lot of times it's virtual. I'm a virtual observer, and so I'm very carefully watching the horse, and I can tell when an intrusive thought comes in immediately in the horse's body. I can energy, however that happens, and I will tell them, okay, what just happened, and let's just step away, and let's just get back in the space, okay? And then what they do while they're in the space of waiting and pausing, I have them go through in their mind in a mental imagery, or if you don't do mental pictures, some kind of physical imagery that you do inside your body. And I have them imagine it going very well and very soft, and they're staying soft in their body. Okay. And so I get them recentered on that, and make sure you make your picture before you go do it, because that's helping you also, because then it gives you direction and you know what you're going to do and you don't have questions about it. Okay. And so really all of these, there's a whole lot of things to think about when you know, what you're talking about is, you know, the mental pictures, keeping our emotional state good, noticing our breathing. Are we grounded? Are we present? Are we, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on. And so it is hard to do them all as a group. So that's why I like to take it super slow, so that you become getting that, the unconscious competence built in. Because as soon as you can do one thing and you don't have to think about it, then you can add another thing and another, okay? So yeah, especially with this stuff, because we haven't been taught it, a lot of us, in school or anywhere where it should be taught. It's not natural.
It's like you had shared in your book. There are two things coming to mind. One, how you shared that I can't recall if you shared that this was your experience or if it was an experience that you've come across, but people not really being able to make that mental picture, like they just have blackness or maybe a distorted vision. And then the other thought coming in is that, like you shared, that humans haven't always been this disconnected from those emotions and the emotional states of beings around us. And we're now learning how to tap back into that, which is, it makes me feel very hopeful to know that there are people tapping back into this. So if anybody out there is struggling with being able to hold a mental picture of like, what does it even look like or feel like in my mind or in my body to visualize this, you know, the hoof coming up nice and slowly and smoothly, and the horse holding it there while I pick it out. What steps do people take to be able to start to develop that ability to have a mental picture?
And I love this. This is, I think mental imagery is such a complex topic, and I could do classes for weeks on end on different techniques and different ways to do it. But I think that the easiest way, and I'll do this often in a clinic, is I will actually just do a little bit of a guided imagery for somebody. And we'll go and do something like, let's go ahead and go back to you getting ready this morning, and we'll walk through all of the sensations, the feelings, the images, the sounds, we touch on every sense that there is in this imagery. And then when I bring them up, I have them think about which one of those was the strongest for you. Was it visual? Was it auditory? Was it kinesthetic? Was it smell? I mean, most people don't use that, but we determine what your primary way is that you imagine. And it's called your internal representation system. And so when we can get some information on that, because when I first was doing it, my primary representational system was kinesthetic. So I couldn't imagine. I saw blackness. But when I realized that my imagination was all about how something felt, and I walk through, and in my imagination I would go through, let's say, a dressage test, and I take this many steps and then I turn this way, and I could feel my body doing those things. And that's as valid of a way to imagine as anything else. Okay. And so before I understood that, I used to think, wow, I just can't do it because I see black. I just see nothing. And so that would make me anxious. And then I go, oh, I can't do this. And then I give up. And it's like, no, don't give up, because I can help you through some of these different techniques to figure out how to find out what your representational system is and how to make the other ones that aren't as strong stronger. Because now, once I realize that, now I do get some flashes of images and I can do more. But it took me some time to train my brain to do that and to put attention, again, putting attention on it and saying, can I please have some images in my mind? And then they would start to come. But again, it's not something you go, oh, I'm just going to do it overnight tonight, and then tomorrow morning I'll be able to do it. No, it takes a little time. Just like a weightlifting program takes you time before you're able to lift heavier weights. And the same is true with your brain. You're reprogramming it. And just a quick little thing for everybody listening is you can kind of tell what your primary representational system is by the words that you use in sentences. If you say things like, I see what you mean, you're probably very visual. If you're kinesthetic, you go, man, I feel your pain. I can feel your pain. So you listen to people and the words they use, and then that will give you clues to what their representational system is and how they imagine. So,
never ever made that connection. That's amazing.
That's why I had to go to school for so long.
Right.
You know, I needed to know these little things, like, why does that not work?
All right, so we do have a couple of more questions in the chat that I'll just read out here. So one is, what tips do you have for not taking on others' negative energy? I find I am surrounded by people who are wanting to do, and I find it hard not to feel pressured to do. So I'm thinking that means, and Jody, feel free to clarify, but what I'm taking from this is I feel like I'm surrounded by people who are wanting to just do things, and rather than be or slow down, and they find it hard to not feel pressured to do that.
Oh my gosh, I wish I had that perfect answer for that one, because I think that's what all of us probably struggle with it, especially if you're empaths and you're picking up the anxiety of people around you, what they want to do, and the pressure of that. And for me, what I have to do is I have to live in a place where I'm away from a lot of that, so that I have a place to regroup and know what is mine and what's not mine, because we get drawn into everybody's stuff. But I don't, again, this is one of those skill sets that takes a while to develop, where you can be so present that you can block off other stuff that's coming in. And it's a lot of times that I've had to do that, as people have asked me to do larger clinics and there's more people and there's a lot of energy going on out there. And there's times when I can hear the chatter and I can feel that, like, why isn't she doing something about that? She should be doing something. And I wonder what she's going to do. Look at that, you know, and I can feel all of that coming in. And it's like, I'm sure the horses can feel all of that coming in. And it's very difficult. I almost have to do like a big wall thing that I've done in my imagination to kind of block that off. But it is tough. And I tell you, there's some techniques I could probably go over with people. It's kind of complicated, but yes, I feel your pain. You see, I'm a kinesthetic person. I feel your pain. I know exactly what you're talking about, because that is probably our biggest challenge. And just think of it, not only for us, but think of what a challenge that is for our horses, who are even more empathic and feel more than we do. That all that chatter, all that emotional stuff, all that information coming in, and they've got to check out sometimes because it's overwhelming, or they get highly anxious and highly spooky because they're like, wow, I can't deal with this. And all of that energy has to go somewhere. So really, I think the bubble thing is a good, I've created the bubble. I did that when I talked about the show in my book. and I was at the horse show, and man, that's one of those spaces where there's all sorts of chaos and lots of people in fear, in anxiety, and horses in fear and anxiety. And I had to go in the warm-up ring and make the bubble around me and go, okay, now I'm in my space, and I made that bubble around me that I'm at my house, I'm riding at my house, everything's good, blocked off everybody around us. And I made it big enough that my horse was in there. And it was almost like then we were immune. But it does take some time to create those bubbles and to be able to maintain them. So
do you visualize like a bubble kind of appearing around you, like an actual physical bubble, or is it just like a mental picture that you're just picturing yourself in a safe space like your house in your riding ring?
here's where I love to use that visualization and know how to do it again, because what I did was I found an image of me riding in my house in my outdoor arena on the perfect day and the perfect whatever, and I made that my bubble, if so to speak. So when I got to the show, I just pretended in my mind I was back at my house riding in that space. And then it created that bubble automatically. So I didn't really think of the bubble in terms of like it was a physical thing. I just separated me from that environment in my mind, if that makes sense. Like, I mean, you can do it many different ways, but for me, that was an effective way to go, okay, I'm just going to pretend I'm in my own little world with my own little horse riding in my own little show. And there's nobody else here. And it's perfect. And again, that takes a little time to maintain, but that was an effective technique for me to use.
It almost makes me think of like a parallel world almost, where it's like you're right there, you're juxtaposed like right underneath each other, and you can still interact with
Right.
what's there, but you're safe in your space.
Exactly.
So let me see here, what else? When horses come to a new place like a clinic, how can they feel your subtle energy when they are very interested in their new environment, other horses, etc.? Like, how can they be so tuned into what's around them, but also you?
Okay, and this is something that I work on, and I've talked a little bit about it on my my Zoom meetings that I do, and then I will do it in the clinics too. Is I like to build in what I call an anchor for the horse, and it's an anchor. This is I brought this in from psychology or from hypnosis, because we do an anchor to indicate to the body to go into a certain mental, physical, emotional state. So if you've seen stage hypnotists and they walk along and then they touch somebody on the forehead and the person goes down and acts like a goofball or whatever they do, that's a form of an anchor. So what I do before I get to a place where there's going to be all that confusion and I need my horse to pay attention and all those kind of things, I will build in this anchor. And what essentially I'm doing is I'm entraining the horse to know that when I touch that spot, or even I can do it with just thinking about that spot, that they will go into a relaxed state. Okay, not a sleeping state, just a relaxed state. And so this takes some time. You build it up, and over time, it's like you touch the horse on the shoulder. You have to be in the state you want to entrain to the horse. Okay, so if you have any level of anxiety, doubt, questioning, anything like that, do not do the anchor, because you're going to anchor in some really crazy stuff. So a lot of times if I'm at a clinic, I will do the anchor for somebody because I have no history with the horse. I can be in that space. I can maintain it for a long time. I can teach the anchor. And then when they go off, they can put their hand there and the horse can go into the relaxed state. So that's one of the ways that I do it, so that I don't have all the horse having to look at everything in his environment. He can walk in, be relaxed at the show. If he starts looking, I'll touch him there, have him come back to me. Cool. All right. So I don't do, there's an idea that has kind of gone on in the horse world, and it works. It's that you move the feet to get to the brain. That's been the saying. Go move the horse around, get its feet moving, then you'll get your horse calm. And I'm so lazy. I'm like, well, I think I'll just go to the brain and to get to the brain. So I'm gonna spend an hour or two, build in my anchors, and there we go. I don't have to keep running the horse around because he's starting to build his own self-regulation, emotional control. He knows, okay, if he entrains to me, I'm showing him, hey, nothing's bothering me, and he goes, oh wow, nothing's bothering you, cool, I can be good too. But this does take practice. This does take a while to get that built in for the horse. And what I do with that anchor is I start building up to more stimulation, more outside stimulation coming in to make sure that the anchor works. You don't work on it and then go out to the show the next day because it's like it's not ingrained in the nervous system strong enough yet to work that quickly. So that's basically what I do.
Do you have an example of a type of anchor you use? I mean, I'm envisioning something like just maybe putting a hand on the pole and just having them kind of just drop down, something like that. Would that be considered an anchor?
That you could do that, and what I usually choose is an anchor that I can use when I'm walking the horse or if I'm on the horse. So this is an example. I did this one of the first times I did it was an off the track thoroughbred that could not stay in his body. He was so nervous. He was so outside of himself that he could not even relax at all. And so it took me over an hour, and I would just put my hand on his shoulder. I usually pick a spot on the shoulder because that way you can reach it when you're on the saddle, in the saddle too, right? If you wanted to. So I just run my hand down. Oh, that feels like a good place. And, you know, in the shoulder, that's also where mares will touch the babies and say, it's okay, it's okay. So I find that's a good place. You can choose another if you decided. But what was interesting, once I got this thoroughbred down, what he would do, and when you notice a horse that's been in that other state of mind a lot, where they get the adrenaline hit, they go up, and they stay up there a lot of the time, and they don't go down very often, so they don't even know what it's like to have dopamine and to feel relaxed. And so their body is so programmed, their nervous system is so programmed to reach for that adrenaline and be in that state. That seems normal to them. And the dopamine and the relaxation seems just awful to them at first. So what I'll do with the anchor, I just want to see them go through the relaxation things, and we could talk about that too if you want, but I want to see them go into the relaxation. They'll stay there for a second or two, they'll pop back up. I put my hand back, I put it down. So this could be so tedious if it's a horse that's been up there a long time. So I worked on this horse, and like I said, it took me an hour before he could just go. If I put my hand there, he could go, oh, now I'm fighting it. You could see his eyes doing the blinking as the dopamine starts, and then he was like, okay, my head's gonna go below my withers now. Okay. And then he's like, I can't fight it anymore. This is good. It's good stuff. Okay. So after I had done that for a while, the woman, I usually don't have somebody ride a horse right after that, but some reason she had to ride him. And she's in the arena riding around on this thoroughbred. And I guess he used to be pretty speedy. Let's just say that. So I can hear, I'm on this, working it with this other person, and I hear, Susie, come quick, you must see this. And I'm like, oh no, what? And she goes, watch this. And she's, the horse is like going kind of fast around the arena, and she put her hand on that spot, and he came down and went, boom, boom. And I'm like, whoa, now that was fast. And I mean, for the hour I spent, now she had this tool that she could use to help with the horse. And of course you have to reinforce that tool all the time, but you know, it works so wonderfully. And so I that's one of the first things I do with horses too, is have people build in an anchor.
It really just seems like a meditative technique, like what humans do. You know, at first your thoughts, because you're in your head, you're anxious and you have all your thoughts going up in there, and you focus on the breath, and they go away, and then they come back, and you just have to do it over again and bring yourself down, and
Exactly.
that relaxes. Oh yeah, that's amazing. Okay, we got another couple of good questions here. Okay. Oh, this is a good one. They're all good, but this one, I've had this one. How would you balance the need to have a horse pick up a foot because he has thrush and needs treatment, but yet refuses to pick it up?
Oh, see,
I know.
that's the one where it's like, oh, because there are times. This is a lot about how much you've worked on yourself, about knowing what it feels like when you have that little bit of anxiety due to a need in your body. And see, this is something I work on way before the situation arises. So, wow, that's a hard one, because it has taken me years to get to that place where I can go up and go, wow, I really need to have that horse pick its foot up, but I can't show him I really need him to pick the foot up, right? And so that's all of this internal knowledge that you have and that you attain over time about how do I know what need feels like in me? Where does it manifest in my body? What do I feel when that idea comes in that I need something to happen? Because that's going to be your indication, and that's going to be your thing to go, hey, there's the trigger. I got to go get rid of that. I usually breathe it down. I'll stop. And I'm going, okay. And it's funny because there was a lady, she needed her horse to get in the trailer. Okay. She needed him. And it was so funny. The more she needed him to, the less inclined he was. It was the brakes went on and he was not going to go in. And I walk him in the trailer and I'm like, okay, I don't have a need for him to get in. Clearly, he's not my horse. I don't need any of this. But, we worked on that. It's like that recognition of when do you feel that come up? And what I would do, she would finally be able to get her horse in, and she wanted to stand in there quietly. So I had her actually go in the trailer and wait for him to come in. And I go, okay, now I can feel your need coming up. And you could see him stop before I even said that. When I picked it up from her, because we're grounded, we can feel each other's stuff that's going on. Like, okay, what are you thinking now? What are you thinking? And she's like, oh, I was thinking it. Okay. I was thinking that I needed him to get in. And when I could finally get her, I use hypnosis sometimes in those cases, like when you have that repetitive idea, I need it, and that tenseness comes in your body and all that. It's like, it sometimes helps to do a little hypnosis to get you so you don't go to that adrenaline space like the thoroughbred. Maybe you need an anchor, of something to go, okay, I don't need it. Because when we can get that, the horses do everything you want in that space of the no need. But how hard is it for us as humans to get there? It's almost impossible sometimes. So this is a really pretty advanced mental training exercise. It takes time to develop that ability to go, I need this to happen, but I can't let it show in my emotions or my body. And a lot of this I'll work with, like before you go out there, before you're even in with your horse, you're making mental pictures of what you want the horse to do. And so you're practicing this away from the horse. And that way, so when you get it, you already see that you can do it. Okay. And this is how one way that you kind of trick your mind into not getting the neediness thing is that you play it over and over so many times in your mind, and you see the result happening that you want, that your subconscious mind doesn't then go to that tension or the need place. But that's a kind of long explanation. It's not easy to do, but it is possible over time. So.
And then they kind of, reiterated the comment that, well, the need is there when it's medical. And like, I agree with you. I had this happen with, it wasn't like a medical need, but a horse needs its feet done. And I had a 2-year-old filly who wasn't quite there with being completely okay with having all the feet come up. So, I would give her just a mild, oral sedative just to kind of
Right.
get her in a place where it wasn't going to be a traumatic experience. And so sometimes when, if that's your solution, whatever you can do to create as little trauma as possible.
Right. And this is a place where I would have built in, like I say, one of the first things I do is build in that anchor for relaxation in the horse. And that's going to be the first thing you do when you go to pick up that foot, is you're going to get the horse in that relaxed state. Okay. And so, yeah, it's kind of hard because, yeah, you always have the need. It's like here, fire season, you have the need of horse to get in the trailer when it, if something happens. So that's usually highly charged emotionally, and boy, is it tough.
And then there was a response to that. Kate said, necessary care is sometimes so incredibly intrusive to the horse. Can our intention be so clear about care that we counterbalance? Can our intention be so clear about care that we counterbalance the yuckiness of this occasional but necessary care?
Yeah. And the key is to not put your own interpretation of how yucky it was going to be onto the horse. And that's the hard part. It's like we're kind of we're projecting and like, oh, that's going to do terrible, horrible. And the horse is like, it is? Oh no, I better get afraid. Okay. And so that's that whole thing. And you can get to the point where you can make the pictures. Okay, we need to do this. I need you to stand still. And that would be great. And it's all about projecting that idea of it's for your good. It's hard to do, but yeah, we need to get this done. And, I've heard a lot of people who have used this, on my site, and they go, oh, we need to worm, or we need to do some kind of oral medication, and the horse is used to throwing its head around. And I just made that pact. It's like, here, we need to do this. And she did it in her mind, away from the horse first. And then when she walked up and the horse came over, and it's like, oh, well, that was weird. So those are people that are really good at like doing that,
Like I went through this exact same thing when I had to worm my horse. And I was aware that I was telling her, I'm like, you're not going to like this. I'm so sorry. It's so necessary, but it's going to be awful. I'm like, oh, maybe I was part of that by kind of setting the stage that it was going to be an awful experience.
Well, my thing is always to be nonchalant about everything. Oh, here we go. We're going to do this. Oh, it was funny when I used to have my foals out, and I'd have to worm them, and they'd be out in the field, and I'd go out there, and they'd all come around like, what you got? What you got? And I got the worming. And I'm like, okay, so who's first? And then it was almost like this honor, like, I'll be first. And because I came to it as like, isn't this a fun thing? We're all going to get wormed today. And they were all standing around. Not one of them had a halter on ever. I just wormed all 6 or 8 of them, and then they went. And I didn't make it a big deal. Yeah, it's like I gave it to them. They're like, that was yucky. Why'd you do that? But it wasn't like they internalized it or thought about it, or it was yucky the next time. It was the next time was the same way. Hey, we're doing worming today. Isn't this fun? And they're all there standing waiting for their turn. And it's really funny.
Yeah, with my dogs, when it's time to clip their nails, which was a traumatic experience for them. And over time, and I had to realize this is what I was doing, was make it nonchalant. And now they sit around waiting for their turn, and they run up when it's their turn.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's true with everything that I do when horses are misbehaving. What I see as misbehaving or something, I'm like, oh, whatever, and I'll just pause. I'll maybe stop my energy for a second, like, not what I wanted. And then when they do what I want, my body gets really soft, and I go, yes, thank you, and so they start to seek the feeling. What the horses are seeking is the feeling they get when they're doing whatever it is they're doing. So if you can figure out how to make the feeling good, then they're more inclined to participate. Okay? So that's why I'm so big on know your emotional fluency, because you can do a lot of stuff and get a lot done by knowing, what does a horse need at this moment? How can I support him in that? How can I change the emotion so that he entrains to an emotion that supports it, whether it's learning or doing something scary or whatever. So I'm always assessing what does this horse need to motivate him? What does it need to feel safe? What does he need in this very particular moment? You know, so
Something you had said just prior to that point you were making about, where are you? What do you need in this moment? You had said something about almost like a nonchalance of just, oh, this is what's happening. And it reminds me of one of the interviews that I heard with Warwick, saying that there was a horse that was kind of like up on its hind legs, when people would be like, oh my gosh, the horse is rearing up. And he's just like, oh, look at you just standing on your hind legs. It's just, it is what it is.
right.
And this is what's happening in the moment. And you have to, you can only respond from that.
Right. And I think part of that too is you have to have a skill set, on the ground, a skill set at riding or on the ground. When a horse presents something like that, that you don't go, wow, that's way outside my skill set. I can't deal with that. And so that's when you bring up your stuff. It's like, for me, training horses for as long as I have, it's like they've shown me pretty much everything they can possibly pull out of their hat as far as something scary. And I'm like, wow, that's impressive. Thanks for showing me. And then I just go back and it's like, no, that's not what I wanted. I wanted this. And I keep going back and making the picture, but I wanted this. But I wanted this. And they'll go, but how about this? And I go, no, I wanted this. And it's always in a nice way, like showing them, saying, and then when they do it, I just go, yes, that's what I wanted. And they go, oh, that was fun. I feel good now when you do that little soft kind of little praise thing you do, and then they go, I think that's more fun than the other stuff. But there are horses that like to pull people into their drama. And you see the behaviors are part about pulling somebody in and making them feel better because now here's somebody else participating in my drama with me. So the person that goes, oh, look at him rear, and they freak out, and then they're doing all this stuff, and the horse goes, I got your number. I can get you there every time. I can push your button, and there you go. I like to see the person going a little nutty because that makes me feel good, like I got power. And
So there's a couple of questions before this one, but this one was related to what you were just saying when you're talking about, you're acknowledging what the horse does and giving it that praise. So I see the questions above this, but this one's related. So I'll get to those ones. Is it okay to use your voice along with the mental/heart thank you when they do what you are wanting them to, or should you keep vocal conversation to a minimum?
Oh, I talk to them all the time. And when I first started natural horsemanship years ago, and I took from a lot of different guys that, because that was who was teaching natural horsemanship back in the day, and they were like, don't be talking to your horse, don't say anything to your horse, don't praise your horse, don't, and I'm like, yeah, but I want to. I want to. And I think that's such an important part because I think there's a lot that can be communicated in the way that we say something, in the tone that we say something, and so my horses know that. I'm always careful to go, good boy doesn't mean stop. That was I made that mistake when I was early in my training, like, oh, good boy, then I stop, and it's like, oh, that's as effective as whoa. Good boy. So yeah,
that was my experience too. Okay, so I'll go back up to some of these other questions here. So what is your recommendation on how to stay grounded when you are in a situation where a horse is very elevated? For example, riding around my neighborhood and dogs charge the fence. My mare is very frightened of them. She spooks and I have a hard time remembering to breathe and definitely have a hard time staying grounded.
Okay, and that's something, again, where I practice the skill set before I get presented with such an extreme situation. And again, this is the other ones that I do a lot of visualization with, because what you can do is in your visualization, imagine the dog coming out, all the crazy stuff happening, and that you're staying in your space. Okay, so you're training, this is all mental training. This is all tricking your brain into believing that what's you're imagining is real. It doesn't know the difference. So the more times you can practice a way in a situation that might come up for you and that you handle it in the most wonderful way, and your horse handles it in the wonderful way, then it trains your body and your mind to go, oh, look, we got that trigger, and look where we go. Instead of holding our breath, we go to breathing and relaxation, and we got the skill. Okay, we've got it all taken care of. So yes, you're still going to get a startle response, but from you and the horse, but that's one of the best ways to start, to train yourself not to just lose your mind, and become ungrounded when something like that happens. Okay, but it does, again, takes repetition, because that's a nervous system function. It's a brain thing, and so you have to override the neural connections that went to going, well, I'm just going to become ungrounded and go this way. Okay, so that's why when I was in my interview with Warwick, and he asked me, what do you think is the most important skill set for an equestrian? I said mental imagery and becoming good at it, because there are so many uses for it. And it helps us in so many ways. So yeah, I'm gonna always go back to that as the basis.
Right. And it's like with the horse, with the anchor, where you touch them on the shoulder and it calms them down, and having something that works on you. So what works for me with my horses, if I need to get myself into that space, is I have a particular image of a horse that's no longer with me, dozing in the sun, and I'm stroking her forehead, and just the sunshine and the peace, around me, like, creates that image. And I wonder if that can kind of help be an anchor of you, just yourself in that peaceful situation.
And that was kind of like what I was talking about at the show, where I had that image from riding at my house in the perfect place and the perfect day and everything, and that was my anchor, that cue to go to that place. And again, this is easier said than done a lot of times. A lot of people tell me, yes, well, everything is easy, but it's not easy. It's difficult to do, and it takes time. And I think that's why this type of horsemanship is a little bit lagging in that, because there's so much more responsibility on the part of the person to have their act together, to become more stable in themselves. And in the past, we could put all the emphasis on the horse, and the horse having to do this or do that. But now we have to look at ourselves, and that's a little bit difficult sometimes, to go, wow, I need to work on that. Wow, I could do this. But when I told you at the very beginning, I don't regret any amount of time I've spent creating, strengthening my mental muscles. I mean, I went and became a mental trainer. And all of those things I would never regret a second that I spent doing that, because now I'm in a space where it doesn't feel like there's very much that really rattles me, and I can work through it. And the same with the horses. I feel like it's even made that so much easier and better. And I'm doing less physical stuff with horses and more just an easy, grounded, wonderful flow that happens now a lot of times with the horses. So I'm not regretting a moment I spent.
Yeah, it's such a great dichotomy, isn't it? It's so easy, but it's also the hardest thing in the world.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. When you are so happy that they're doing good, is it okay to feel excited and soft, or better to just be soft and mellow, in quotations, in energy, or does it depend on the horse?
It really depends on the horse. And I love this one, because I have another little exercise that I do with people, and it's for catching the horse. It's for if you wanted to do liberty with the horse. We go through different emotional states, and we create them in our body, and we watch for the reaction from the horse. So some horses do not like when you get like super excited and silly. Some horses love it. So it really depends on what your horse's reaction is to that particular thing that you're doing. And that's where you kind of know, and that's why I'm talking about your emotional fluency. But it doesn't necessarily go across the board to every single horse. You have to be able to modify it, or look at the horse that you're with at that moment and go, wow, what does this horse want? What does this horse need? what is he attracted to? What repels him? I mean, a lot of times people go, I want to just do love. And it's like sometimes if a horse has trauma, just like a person, if they feel that, that's a pretty overwhelming energy that comes with love. And also there's other things attached to it. And that I'd like to talk just a little bit second about the attachment of other emotions to a main emotion, because wow, I've seen horses just go, I'm out of here, lady, when they go, I love you so much. And he's like, you can see his eyes getting big, and he's like, I gotta get away from her. And you can see him just leave. But getting onto that, there you could just kind of play with those different emotions, see what ones attract your horse, which ones don't. And then part of this recognition of this emotional fluency and how you feel is that when we have an emotion, we usually have something else attached to it. So let's say one time I was talking to this lady, we got in this place of joy, and she was doing pretty good, and the horse was with her, and then all of a sudden he's just like out of there. And I'm, okay, what were you just thinking? And she goes, oh man, I had the greatest image of me with my father. We were camping, we were doing, it was a family thing and everything. And then this other event happened that she brought into it. And then it spiked this other emotion that got attached to it. And that was like, he's out of there. So it's like her joy was, the strongest joy was also one of the strongest of a negative emotion attached with it. So that was really a tough one. And that was one of the first times I saw that happen. Like, I thought we were doing good, and then all of a sudden the horse is gone. And that's when I quizzed the person. Tell me exactly, what were you just thinking? Because we need to know what just happened there, because you don't want to inadvertently do that when you're riding or with your horse, because he needed to leave really fast. So that's how critical it is that we pay attention to what's going on internally, thoughts and emotions.
So related to this, there are people who have just their horses and they know their horses, and so they kind of develop this relationship with them along the way. And then there are people who might be trainers or taking in horses for training that they don't know. I myself am doing Race the Wild Coast in October, which is 270 miles along the wild coast of South Africa, and we're riding horses that we don't know. Do you have any examples or any recommendations for people who might be not just working with a horse that they know, love, trust, respect, etc., and a horse that they don't know? How do you create a rapport with them quickly, or how do you kind of tune into a horse that you don't know quickly and figure out the best way to regulate your own emotions?
And that's a really good one. And I think I talked about it a little bit at the first, that it's almost like now, because I've gone into all this training of awareness and all this kind of thing, that I can go up to a horse, and like the very first thing I do is I don't approach the horse and just go up to it and go, hi, here, start, people start petting it. I step back, I check where I'm at, I get into kind of a neutral space of no thought, no, just grounding, just breathing, and wait for that horse to come and acknowledge me. And what they'll usually do is they'll come in, and it's like I get in the space, I can have my back to them or forward, and they just will come in, and they're very softly, they'll just touch me on the forehead or breathe by the side of my face, and that's their hello. Wow, it seems like you're like a horse. You're kind of neutral, you're kind of just okay, don't have any agenda, okay? And so really with strange horses, not strange, but with horses you don't know, I always default back to, let me be in neutral space. Let me just be here. Let me just be, and let them find me in that space. And then you can then play a little bit with, do you want to do safety and comfort? Can you bring safety and comfort? How does he react to that? And pretty soon you can have, as you practice again with your mental imagery, you can practice these different emotions, and you go, okay, I want to create excitement or joy or something. And so if you've practiced at home, like joy, here's my story that goes with joy that helps me create joy. Or here's a song I think of in my mind that helps me create this feeling of exhilaration or going, you know, especially if a horse doesn't want to go forward, exhilaration or something like that. So you've practiced all these before you get there. So you have a good album, a good long list of different emotions. And you can, once you practice them a few times, all you have to do is think of that situation and your body goes there. Okay, so that's really like when I'm working with a horse now, I can go, oh, safety and comfort. I just have to think that I'm there, I'm doing it. Okay, or now I have to switch to joy, or now I have to give a little bit of encouragement and be in this space. So being able to go back and forth between different emotions, that before you go there and do that, you know, you practice different things, then you'll know you can just kind of play with that. Oh, that one seemed to kind of shut him down a little bit. Let me try something, another thing. Okay, but really it is, I think, if overall just being in that neutral space, well, you'll be pretty well off. Because I notice I'm in that space a lot, and horses will just hang with me and they'll do whatever. And then I'll go, oh, I think I'd like you to move your leg over. And then they move over and it's like, cool. Because it's very pure. There's nothing else there. And so when you put a picture in of something you want them to do, there's no static in it. It just goes to that place. So yeah.
When in doubt, hang out in neutral.
Yes, when in doubt, always hang out in neutral. And it was so funny because I don't get a whole lot of men at my clinics, and I've had men at like everyone lately this summer, and I was teasing about the one guy, well, both of the guys that I've had recently, the horses were just really like, they just went up and were like magnets on him. And so the women would go, well, what's up with that? And I go, well, it's because they have that man compartment in their brain where nothing happens. You know, it's that one over there. Women are going, I don't know what that one is. And it's like, well, and I told him, I said, yeah, it took me a long time to get the man compartment installed where I can go there and there's absolutely nothing in that room. And if you ask me what I'm thinking, I go, nothing. And then the women go, yes, you were. What were you thinking? I go, no, nothing. So, yes, it's very good to develop your...
Guilty of this. I'm sure people can relate here.
Yes.
Okay, what else do we have? Okay, and then just a comment of the tone of my voice actually helps bring my mare's energy level up or down. If I talk excitedly and my voice pitch is higher and she gets more energetic too. Is that something that you can relate to?
Oh, yes, definitely. And that's, I think I was talking about when the natural horsemanship guys were saying, don't talk to your horse. It's like, there's much to be gained from that. I mean, just what she's saying is the tone of your voice is going to reflect what's going on and what maybe you want them to feel like. So it's another way to do that. Again, you know, I had a guy too with, you know, we played music and that's singing and that's tones and that's different things. And we were using it to motivate his horse. So he picked this really big, bold song because his horse was not very forward and didn't want to go. And so I'm like, okay, I couldn't get him to get there in his mind or speaking or anything like that. And so I said, well, let's play music and let's pick a song. And it was so beautiful because his big old horse was, you know, plodding along, and then he turned that music on and it was like this Viking, you know, it's like this great motivation, and his horse just picked up this cannon and went off. I mean, a big drafty kind of horse, and it was like, we're all just going, oh, that's so neat. But yeah, it's the tones have energy in them. So yes, use them to your advantage. And when I told everybody here at the beginning, you play with this stuff, you experiment, you have fun with it, you find your own way in this. And sometimes people get upset at me because it's like, tell us the formula or tell us exactly how to do it. And I'm not going to, because I want you to find it. I want you to experience it, because when you discover it and experience it on your own, it's far more impactful than if I tell you how to do it. I'll give you some principles, I'll help you along, but I'm never going to give you the whole thing, because that's part of this intuitive piece and learning that and being able to trust yourself. And that I don't think we trust, just like horses who have been micromanaged and ridden a lot, they're the spookiest, most insecure horses, because every step of their life they've been managed, every single step. And I think in our lives, a lot of us has been, I was micromanaged for a long time. Maybe that's why I don't want to do that for anybody else or a horse, because it's takes away your drive. It takes away your motivation. It takes away your creativity and your drive to find some other way to do things, and the freedom. And I think those are all things that a lot of the people that gravitate toward my book or the work that I'm doing are looking for, is that freedom from having to do it a way that they've been told. But then it's also scary, because then it means you have to trust yourself that what you come up with is okay.
And then you often feel like you've just like launched off of the shore, and you're kind of floundering in water, not really knowing where to go or how to get there, because you're on your own, because you're not being micromanaged the shoreline.
Right.
We just had somebody ask a question saying they're just beginning groundwork as a prelude to starting their 6-year-old stallion under saddle. Have you seen any differences in working with stallions from working with mares or geldings?
Okay, so I had a big stallion at one time, a big warm blood stallion, probably 1,300 pounds, which was, and I'm 5'1", and at the time about 100 pounds. And so that was intimidating. But what I found was, if I got past that point of, because people would say, oh, Susie, there's no way you can handle that horse, he's too big. If we have a stallion, I think mares too. Mares to me are a lot like the stallions. It's like the more you can become consistent in your thoughts, and then your actions follow the thoughts you made or your pictures, and that you're consistent and you're fair, that it's very simple. That the expectation is there, and that so much gets put into that about, oh, it's a mare or it's a stallion, so it should act this way or it should be like that. I don't buy that. I treat them as with great caution and awareness, because that's what you need to be with a stallion, is very much aware every moment of what you're thinking and what you're doing. And if you are, and you don't buy into any drama that they might try to create for you, you're going to be fine. I don't really make the differentiation between one or the other. And lots of people don't like mares because they say, well, they're opinionated or this. No, they just expect you to be a whole lot more consistent than you are, and they don't like flightiness. They want stability, and that's the same thing with the stallion. They want to know what are the rules, and how do I follow them, and they're happy to do it.
So kind of what I'm taking from this is there may be some differences between the mare, stallions, and geldings, but really just work with that you have and respond and react to that horse, instead of having a preconceived notion about how that horse is going to be.
Right. Because I've seen, and I had my one horse that was in my book, the picture of Crush. He's the little black horse at the beginning. He was a stallion still at the time that I was starting him there, and up until he was about 4. And I never noticed any difference at all with him compared to any of the geldings or anything else. I just had, okay, we're doing this and we're doing that, and he was okay. And I think it is because once we start going, ooh, now this happens and that happens, we start making the pictures in our mind, and our body reflects it, and they start picking up on, ooh, wow, I must have to be like that. Okay, maybe I should be more like that. And people don't even realize what pictures they're making, and they're going, well, I don't want him to do that, and they're making the picture of him doing it. Of course, That's how your brain works. You think of the thing you don't want, and that's what the horse goes, are you sure you want that? Oh, well, okay. And then they get in trouble for it because they listened to that picture you made, and then they got in trouble. And that's when they start getting freaky and like doing behaviors that you don't want, because they're so confused that your pictures did not align with your actions and what was expected of them. So that's what I would advise, is to be very critically aware of what you're doing, where you're going, make your picture of what you're going to do before you do it. That's that pre-cue I talk about, and follow through. And then the horse has no reason to start to question or to get upset, because it's like, oh, you're really clear. Okay, so that's what I would advise on that one. I just saw Chris Irwin says a horse is a horse is a horse. Yes. Yeah.
And you can't control the horse. You can only control how you respond to the horse.
Right.
Very true.
Right.
Well, I had one question that I kind of wanted to touch on here briefly, since the flow of other questions have kind of stopped here. But the section about intention, and particularly talking about energy bubbles. So you had that diagram that kind of showed a more closer energy bubble, and kind of having like a collected horse versus like an extended trot and kind of a bigger energy bubble. So my question there is, do you have any suggestions for separating, and I think this might be a hard thing, separating your body from the energy or the intention? So for example, I'm probably not the only one who does this when like thinking about a smaller energy bubble, you know, my body kind of tightens up, or a bigger energy bubble and you just kind of, you know, slouch into it. So how do you practice that, or where do you start to make that distinction?
Okay, so I guess I would have to know how you're thinking about your energy bubble. What process do you use to create your energy bubble? How are you creating
that? Oh, that was an actual question. So I think for me, like if I'm doing that, I definitely feel stuff kind of starting kind of up here in this upper area. So that's kind of where energy is generating from. And I don't think it should be generating from there. I think it should be generating from kind of lower down in the core, and kind of like the seat area. But so I think maybe that might be the problem right where I'm generating.
Yeah, and I think of the energy generating from my breathing. I'm thinking that when I create that bubble, it's more coming from my heart, from my core. It's going out here. It's through my breath, actually. My breathing is the place where the energy is expanding or contracting. So I'll bring that energy, my breath, like into a shorter area in front of me, but I always am checking, did I bring any tension into my body when I changed the size of that energy bubble or expanded it out? So if I wanted, like one of the things a lot of people do when they do an extended trot, let's say, is they'll get to the corner and they know they're going to do it. So they get a little anxious and a little like pushing it out. So it kind of disrupts the whole thing. It becomes a faster energy, not just an expansive energy. This is when we get to really complicated explanations of it. So if I was coming around and I wanted to do an extended trot and I wanted that energy to come out, I'm going to check and make sure my body didn't get tenser in that. And I'm just going to project that energy bubble way out in front of me, so that it really, like, it draws out in front. And this is something I play with people on when we're in a lesson. We'll play with different imagery to see which one works for you to create that movement that you're wanting in that energy bubble. So everybody's a little bit different, and I find that we kind of play with it until we get an image that works for them, based on their internal representation system. You know, are they kinesthetic? Or are they very visual? And so we're going to have to look at which one how do we do this based on that? So it gets a little more complicated to give a blanket answer to that question.
No,
So
I understand that.
you might just think about your breath as being that bubble and try that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But I don't speed up my breath when I want to go faster. It's kind of interesting. It comes from more in the mind, I think, than it does anything else. So.
Well, I'll take one more. We had one more question that came in here, and then we can wrap it up. Been absorbing your wisdom for an hour and a half now. So the last question, and I need to wrap my head around this one here. So I'll read it as it is. Would you align your work more with how to get a horse to do what a person wants/needs, or as a way to create a better relationship with the horse where confidence and trust are the result over time?
I choose the second one.
Yeah.
Because the relationship is a foundational piece for everything. And with that, then everything I ask is easy.
So maybe not goals focused, but
I'm
relationship.
I'm not at all. It's so funny because society makes us think we're all goal oriented and you have to have a goal. And I've talked about this on one of my Zoom meetings about the difference between the goal and the intention. And my intentions are always super soft. And I'm always, again, just like if we had a relationship with a person and we wanted to go do something with them and we wanted to motivate them, we're like, wow, how could I motivate them to want to spend time with me or to do this particular activity? Let's say it's something like, okay, first of all, we have to go clean out my dad's garage, which is all messy and terrible and smelly and everything. And then we get to go out to dinner afterwards. And how would I motivate them to come and do the icky part of the job and then with the payoff of the other? And part of it is throughout all the things that I'm doing when we're working in the garage and it's awful is how fun can we make this? How much of an enjoyable relational experience can this be when we're doing this other icky thing? And then we go and knowing that we're going to do this other thing afterwards. So everything is about a relationship with me. And sometimes I used to paint houses sometimes for people and they call me and I never thought about painting the house. It was all about what relationship am I going to create with those people in the house. And it would always end up being that we would be laughing and having fun during the whole process. And like, I remember this one time I went and this husband was like really grumpy and he was, he didn't say anything. And I just went about being in the neutral space and I'm painting. And that's why I painted, is because it helped me really solidify my neutral space. I could be there and do this thing all day long. And just me doing that, then he started talking to me. And then I talk about all sorts of different subjects and he would go, how come a painter knows how to talk about all these topics? It's like, well, because I don't know, because I've had a lot of experiences in my life. And that whole situation was, he kept going, what can we hire Susie to do after this? Because I just want her to be here. And that's what I want to do for our horses, is that when I go out with my horses, I want them to go, I don't care what we're doing, I want to be with you. And I will do whatever you want because I love this feeling I get when I'm with you. And so that's the answer to that question. I've never made a horse do something they didn't want. I don't go there. And even though I went to the horse show and I used to show, it was always for fun. It was always to just experience lots of horses. And for me, getting off the ranch and seeing other people and, those kind of things. And the horse shows were actually, I went to them because I had all my friends there. And it was this relational piece again. Everything that I've done in my life has been about creating these strong relationships, and not just superficial ones, but deep ones where I know you and I care about you and I want to create, I want to know about you. I want to know about you. And that's where I am with the horses. And
I think we can all relate to that sentiment of wanting that type of relationship with our horse, where you just created this synergy and this relationship where you just want to be with each other, which I think is a really great, I think this is a perfect ending here to this great conversation, and kind of leaving us with a positive mental image in our minds of what we want with our horses.
Yeah. And don't you see how it also relates to our human relationships, because this is teaching us all those things that are important.
Absolutely. Yeah, last comment. For a horse, being taken out for dinner is getting to go and graze. Yeah, exactly.
There we go. There we go. Perfect. Perfect.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you. I can't thank you enough. I mean, I have taken so much. My notebook is filled with notes here, and I can't wait to go out and take some of this, from both from the book and from hearing you say it, because this is how I learn things, is by hearing it. So I'm definitely an auditory learner.
Yeah.
But all right. So thank you so much, and thank you to everybody who is on for our first discussion group.
Oh, this was so fun. I just want to tell everybody how much I appreciate them, and we're all in this together, and we're all exploring new territory. So isn't this fun?
Yeah, it is fun. All right. Well, good night, everybody, or good morning to some of you in Australia.
Yes.
Thank you, Aleta and Susan. That was fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
Bye from Australia.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you, Susan. Thanks, Aleta.
Thank you.
Bye,
both.
everyone.
Bye.
Thanks from Germany.
Wow.
That's so fun.
Thanks from Kentucky.
Whidbey Island.
Where?
Whidbey Island.
Oh,
Oh, amazing.
Please come. Washington State. Please come.
absolutely. How fun would that be? All right.
Beautiful here.
Everybody.
Yes, I